Coronavirus is our top story, and part of that is quarantine. So we want to take a deeper look at what exactly is involved with quarantine. Canadians, as you know, are part of the cruise ship that is quarantined in Japan, and there are now more than 200 people starting 14 days locked up at CFB Trenton. Have you wondered perhaps what the psychological impact of quarantine might be? Our Chase team has reached Kerry Bowman. He's a bioethicist at the University of Toronto. And in fact, he was under quarantine during the SARS outbreak, which was back in 2002 and 2003. And Kerry is right here in studio. I think about those people that I spoke with at the airport in Wuhan yesterday, Kerry, and now they're in Trenton at the base there, and they're going into quarantine. How challenging is that?
Well, it's very challenging, and remembering that these people have been on essentially a lockdown for a long period of time, and now they're moving into a 2-week quarantine. You know, what we know from SARS, and this is evidence-based, is that depression, and for some, not all, but depression and even PTSD absolutely can be associated with...
In 14 days? I mean, 14 days at my age seems like, you know, it flies by like that, but...
Depends what the conditions are, you know, depends what the conditions are and what the fear factor is. It's not kind of one size fits all. Research is also telling us very clearly it's a lot of personality differences. Some people can adapt very quickly and easily, others not much at all. So a lot of variation on that one.
I spoke with a woman yesterday, a couple actually, and they were leaving Wuhan, and they both had masks on, and they had 2 kids with them. One was a 6-year-old and one a 2-year-old. The 2-year-old wanted nothing to do with the mask, as you can imagine.
Surprisingly.
So now they're having to deal with them in quarantine at this base at Trenton. How much more difficult is it when you've got kids involved?
Well, it's going to be, children cannot, especially young children, cannot possibly comprehend this, and the strain will particularly be on the parents. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough.
And what's the toughest thing?
Well, the toughest thing will be the isolation. And so, the question that's hanging in the air, is this necessary? Do we really have to have this rather than what's called self-quarantine, move people into their own homes? And that's an open question. I'm going to leave that for the epidemiologists. But, what I wonder about is if these people have been overseas for some time, can we really assume that they all have a nice home to just slip into anyway for 2 weeks? They may not. And you really have to be in control of your own environment, and they may not have that. So there's factors we may not know everything about with this.
If you look at the screen, Kerry, we've got some video of the accommodations there at Trenton, so you can see in some cases, it looks like 2 queen beds and a bathroom and, clean, all that kind of stuff. They probably have all the sterile equipment that they need. Look at the medical kits there, probably taking their temperatures by themselves, et cetera, et cetera. How important is the environment, or is it, it doesn't matter what the environment is, you're in isolation no matter what?
No, the environment is very, very important, but I would also add that's great. It's a clean, safe environment, but they would need to do everything they can to maximize people's contact. And I speak electronically and technology with the outside.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. And I would even say, because we know what occurred during SARS, you really would want to have people that are properly trained to stand by for their own psychological support. And again, I'm not saying that isn't happening, but you really have to think about people's psychology and emotional needs as much as their physical.
What about for you when you were quarantined in SARS? Easy, hard?
No, for me it was easy, but that doesn't mean it's easy for everyone.
Yeah.
I was in my own home. I did not feel particularly fearful of it. I work overseas a lot. I've been in a lot of high-risk situations. That's just me. I'm not saying that's true of everyone. And right now, we've got quarantines going on essentially all over the world.
Absolutely.
So quarantine is something we need to be thinking about. And do we have the perfect ethical formula, or even, political formula for? We don't.
Kerry, we saw that video from the accommodations at CFB Trenton. It's a base. The commander was telling us it's one of the newly renovated buildings, et cetera. So people are going into this place when they are in quarantine. But then if you're on a ship, and let's say you couldn't afford a balcony, because they're expensive, right? And you're in an inside cabin, and you're one of the people quarantined on that cruise ship. How different is it in that scenario?
It's radically different for a couple of reasons. One is there's cases emerging within that ship, and so the outbreak is real. So the fear factor will compound the complexity of the quarantine. I actually didn't even know ships had tiny little rooms without windows. I've obviously not been on cruise ships, but I didn't even realize that. So if you combine the fact that cases are emerging on this ship, and many people are very far from home, very few of those people are Japanese citizens, if any.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different thing. It's also a different thing from a medical point of view, because you've got, one of the ethical concerns with quarantine is you're actually putting healthy people in harm's way. Right? When you say to healthy people, you need to be quarantined within this. Now, they're in different rooms,
right,
but there's still the risk of contagion on that ship.
There was a woman on that ship, one of the ships, who said, I just want to get home, and I'll be at home and be quarantined and in isolation.
Yeah.
Final question for you. How difficult is it at the end of the day, after 14 days, wherever you are, to sort of resume everything again?
It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough, and there could be psychological implications. Financial, we haven't even talked about. I mean, there's lots of people that are going to be removed from the workforce because of this. It's going to be tough, and we need more research and more data. And I'd love to say this is almost over, but it doesn't look like it is. We're going to have to face these issues in the weeks ahead, repeatedly, I think.
Wow, I don't know where it hits the apex as well.
I don't either, and don't think anyone does.
Yep.
But I think there's broad consensus we're not there yet.
I want to thank you for your time, Kerry. I appreciate you sharing your story and helping us with your insight. Kerry Bowman is a bioethicist at the University of Toronto.